My dad canceled my plane ticket while I was standing at Denver International Airport, then sent me 2 words, "Walk home." He expected me to panic, buy another ticket, and crawl back into line behind the family that had just humiliated me. Instead, I laughed once and typed, "You sure?" His confidence vanished almost instantly. My phone lit up with calls from Dad, Mom, then my brother. 5 minutes later, their SUV swung back toward departures to pick me up, but I was already gone. What terrified my father wasn't losing me at the airport. It was realizing what else I could take with me. At 38, I had built the kind of life my family loved to brag about and quietly depend on. I worked as a forensic accountant in Denver, which meant I spent my days tracing missing money, finding patterns. People hoped no one would notice and asking uncomfortable questions when numbers didn't add up. Funny thing was, I almost never asked those questions at home. Every Sunday, we ate dinner at my parents' house. Mom Linda always lit the same vanilla candle and rearranged the framed family photos on the sideboard before anyone arrived. Dad Robert talked about his HVAC business like it was one big contract away from exploding. My younger brother Ethan, 28, usually showed up late, dropped his pharmacy school backpack by the door, and complained about how expensive everything had become. I was the one who listened. I was also the one who paid. Not for everything. Just enough that nobody ever had to feel the full weight of their choices. A tuition gap for Ethan here. A household bill there. About $1,500 a month toward Dad's SUV after his temporary cash flow problem somehow became permanent. Vacations, emergencies, little rescues that never looked dangerous by themselves. Mom always thanked me the same way. "You're the strong one, Nora." Dad had been saying that since I was 16. Back then, I thought it meant he trusted me. By 38, I had started wondering whether it really meant we never have to worry about what this costs you. Still, I kept helping. That spring, Mom turned 60, and I planned a family trip to Santa Barbara. She had spent months talking about the ocean-fresh flowers and one perfect dinner where all 4 of us would sit together without talking about bills. I wanted that too, so I booked most of it. The house, the rental vehicle, dinner, a few activities. Altogether, I was covering about $20,000. For a few weeks, Mom acted happier than I had seen her in years. Then Dad asked me to dinner alone. He slid a folder across the table and told me he wanted to expand his business. New service vehicles, new equipment, a larger territory. The loan was about $350,000. He needed me to help guarantee it. I reviewed the numbers that night. Late bills, weak cash flow, old debt, revenue that did not support the expansion he wanted. The answer was obvious. No, Dad didn't argue. He just stared at me for several long seconds, folded his hands, and said, "I understand." 3 days later, he became unusually kind, and I should have been far more afraid of that than his anger. The morning we were supposed to leave for Santa Barbara, Denver was still gray and cold. Dad picked me up before sunrise. The heater in his SUV blew dry air across my face while a paper cup of coffee warmed my hands. He was almost cheerful. Too cheerful. At the airport, he pulled toward departures and glanced at the traffic behind us. "You go ahead," he said. "Your mom, Ethan, and I will park. We'll meet you inside." I grabbed my suitcase and stepped onto the curb. Dad smiled. Not warmly, just enough that I noticed it later. Inside, suitcase wheels rattled across the polished floor. Announcements echoed overhead. I walked to a self-service kiosk, entered my information, and waited. The screen refreshed. No reservation. I tried again. Same result. An airline employee came over, took my ID, and checked the booking. Her expression changed. "Your ticket was canceled." I actually laughed from confusion. "Canceled by who?" She looked back at the screen. The primary person on the reservation. My stomach tightened. "Dad." I stepped away and called him. No answer. "Mom." No answer. "Ethan." Straight to voicemail. That was when my hands started getting cold. Not because I was stranded. I could buy another ticket if I had to. It was the silence. 3 people I loved had suddenly decided I didn't deserve an explanation. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. 2 words. "Walk home." I stared at the screen while strangers moved around me carrying backpacks, coffees, crying toddlers, neck pillows. Nobody knew that my own father had just tried to reduce me to a woman standing alone beside a suitcase. For one awful second, I wondered if I had caused this. Maybe I had been too harsh about the loan. Maybe I should call him again. Maybe I should just fix it. Then I remembered his numbers, the overdue bills, the debt, the $350,000 he wanted attached to my name, and suddenly the timing made perfect sense. This wasn't anger. It was leverage. Dad expected me to panic, buy another ticket, chase them to California, spend several days being treated like the family problem, then finally agree to help him. I looked at his message again, and something inside me went completely still. A dry laugh escaped my throat. Then I typed exactly 2 words. "You sure?" I hit send. For a moment, 3 dots appeared beneath his name, then disappeared. He didn't answer, but somehow I knew my father was no longer smiling. And I was about to find out exactly what he had just remembered. I moved to a row of seats beside a coffee stand and opened the travel app on my phone. The house in Santa Barbara was under my name. So was the rental vehicle. So was the dinner reservation Mom had talked about for weeks, along with the activities I had booked for all of us. I didn't touch their plane tickets. I didn't touch anything that belonged to them. I only canceled what I had paid for and what I was legally allowed to cancel. A couple of reservations carried fees. I accepted them. Then my phone started vibrating. Dad, Mom, Ethan, Dad again. I let every call go unanswered. 5 minutes later, I looked through the glass doors toward departures and saw Dad's SUV swing back into the lane. He jumped out before the vehicle had fully settled at the curb. Mom was in the passenger seat. Ethan was in the back. Dad was scanning the sidewalk, turning in circles, phone pressed to his ear. For 1 second, I almost felt guilty. Then my rideshare pulled away. They were too late. By the time I reached my apartment, the anger was gone. That scared me more. I dropped my suitcase near the door, sat on the kitchen floor, and cried so hard I could barely breathe. Not because I missed Santa Barbara, because 3 people had agreed I deserved to be humiliated until I became useful again. I called my Aunt Susan. She listened without interrupting. Then she said quietly, "Your father told me you were getting too independent. He said you needed to remember what family had done for you." That sentence changed something in me. I opened my laptop. For the next hour, I listed every financial tie I had to them. Ethan's school support, Dad's SUV, household bills, recurring family expenses. Then I separated them into 2 columns: voluntary support, legal obligations. I didn't want revenge. I wanted out without destroying my own future. So I stopped every voluntary payment I could stop immediately and marked the contracts that needed to be handled properly. That afternoon, Ethan called. He didn't ask if I had gotten home safely. He asked, "What happened to my payment?" I closed my eyes. I ended it. Silence. Then panic. "Nora, you can't do that." I just did. He started blaming Dad. Said the airport stunt wasn't his idea. So I asked one question. "Did you know?" He didn't answer. My chest tightened. "Ethan, did you know Dad was going to cancel my ticket?" Another silence. Then he whispered, "Yes." "Why didn't you warn me?" His voice dropped. "I thought you'd give in." That hurt more than Dad's message. They hadn't just expected me to forgive them. They had built the entire trap around it. And for the first time, I decided forgiveness would no longer come with access to me. The first time Dad brought the fight into my professional life, he made one mistake. He assumed embarrassment still worked on me. 2 weeks after the airport, he and Mom showed up at my office building before lunch. Our office manager warned me first. "Your parents are downstairs," she said carefully. "Your father is upset." By the time I reached the lobby, Dad was talking loud enough for people near the elevators to hear. "This has gone too far, Nora. You don't punish your family because you're angry." Mom stood beside him, clutching her purse. "Ethan is terrified about school. Please stop doing this." I looked at them through the security gate. "I'm not doing anything to you." Dad's jaw tightened. "You cut off the vehicle. You stopped helping with bills. I stopped paying expenses that were never mine. People were slowing as they passed." That was exactly what Dad wanted. So I turned to the security supervisor. "They aren't authorized visitors. Please handle this according to building policy." Dad stared at me. For once, he had no audience he could control. They left furious. Then he changed tactics. He started telling relatives I had become cold, unstable, obsessed with money. I stayed silent. Then Susan called. "Your mother's birthday dinner is happening again," she said. "Big ballroom. 50, maybe 60 people. I already knew what was coming." Susan sighed. "Robert is telling everyone you're coming to apologize. He says you're restoring the family support." That was when I decided to show up. Not to humiliate him, to stop his version of the story from becoming permanent. When I walked into the ballroom that Saturday night, conversations softened almost instantly. Dad stood near the front, smiling like he had won. "There she is," he announced. "Our family is finally whole again. A few people applauded. I stayed standing. Before anyone congratulates me for an apology I never made, you should know what I'm supposedly apologizing for. The room went still. Dad's smile disappeared. I explained the canceled ticket. Then I held up my phone. After he canceled it, my father sent me 2 words. "Walk home," someone whispered. What? Dad stepped forward. "You're twisting this." "No, I'm finally telling it in the right order." I told them about the $350,000 loan, the weak cash flow, the old debt, the fact that I refused to attach my name to a risk I knew was dangerous. Then I explained the support I had provided for years. Ethan's education, Dad's vehicle, household expenses, trips, not because I owed them, because I loved them. Dad cut in. "So this is about money." I looked at him. "No, this is about what you thought money gave you permission to do." Then I turned to Mom. "Did you know Dad was going to cancel my ticket before I got to the airport?" Dad snapped. "Linda, don't answer that." I kept my eyes on her. "Mom." Her eyes filled. "Yes." The room changed. "And you let me walk inside alone." She covered her mouth. Then the words came too fast. "We thought if you felt what it was like to be left out, you'd stop acting like you didn't need us." Nobody moved. Dad looked at her like she had destroyed the one story he still controlled. That was the truth. They didn't just want my money. They wanted fear attached to my refusal. I looked at all 3 of them. "You didn't lose my money because I stopped loving you. You lost access to it when you decided my love could be punished into obedience." Then I walked out with Susan beside me. Behind us, no one applauded. They didn't need to. For the first time, silence was on my side. The fallout was not dramatic. That was what made it feel real. Dad did not lose his business overnight. Mom did not wake up homeless. Ethan did not get thrown out of school. They simply had to start paying for their own choices. Without my name attached to the loan, Dad's expansion died quietly. He canceled plans for new service vehicles, delayed replacing equipment, and cut expenses he had spent years pretending were necessary. The SUV disappeared next. I did not stop paying and wait for my credit to collapse. I contacted the finance company, reviewed the agreement, paid what I legally owed, and arranged for the vehicle to be returned. Dad called that cruel. I called it ending a contract that should never have become my responsibility. Mom picked up more hours at work. The expensive dinners slowed down. The weekend shopping trips stopped. The little luxuries she once described as normal family life suddenly had price tags attached to them. Ethan took out student loans and found weekend work. For the first time, he had to study after a shift instead of calling me when money got tight. About 3 months later, he sent me a message. No request, no mention of tuition, just an apology. He said he had spent years assuming I would always fix things because I always had. He said that did not excuse what he did. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down. I was not ready to forgive him. But for the first time, I believed he might actually understand what forgiveness would require. Susan stayed in my life. We met for coffee most Saturdays. Sometimes we talked about the family. Sometimes we talked about absolutely nothing important. That mattered more than I expected. She showed me that setting boundaries did not mean I had to become alone. It meant I could finally choose which relationships felt safe. One afternoon, I found an old family photograph in a drawer. Mom had taken it years earlier. Dad stood in the center. Ethan had one arm around him. Mom was smiling perfectly. I was at the edge of the frame. For years, I had looked at that picture and thought, we were happy then. Now I saw something different. A photograph can capture everyone smiling and still miss the truth completely. A few months after the ballroom dinner, Dad came to my building. He stayed outside. That alone told me something had changed. I answered through the intercom. "Nora, enough time has passed," he said. "Your mother misses you. We should put this behind us." I had one question. If you could go back to that morning at the airport knowing everything that happened afterward, would you cancel my ticket again? Silence. Then he said I would handle it differently. Not no. Not I was wrong. Just differently. And suddenly I had the closure I had been waiting for. He regretted the consequences. He still believed he had been entitled to teach me a lesson. "I understand," I said. Then I ended the call. After that, I updated my emergency contacts, reviewed my beneficiaries, removed old permissions, and made sure there were no financial ties left that I had forgotten about. Months later, I finally went to Santa Barbara, alone. I rented a simple convertible and drove with the windows down while the Pacific air filled the car. That evening, I sat at a small restaurant overlooking the water. The server smiled. Just one tonight, I looked at the empty chair across from me. Once that question would have hurt. This time I smiled back. Yes, just one. Dad had told me to walk home. It just took me a while to understand that home was never supposed to be a place where I paid admission. I used to think keeping the peace meant saying yes, paying the bill, and swallowing the hurt. I was wrong. Love is not a debt, and family does not earn unlimited access to your time, money, or dignity. I did not win because my father lost control. I won because I finally stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was to everyone else. If you have ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself, share your story in the comments and subscribe so you do not miss the next story.